Now, Lynn stirred beneath the crisp white sheets of her hotel bed, a smile dancing on her lips. Her dreams had been electric. Champagne toasts in a candlelit jacuzzi, soft jazz playing in the background, kisses on the balcony, and making love in her queen-size bed. It had all felt so real, like a vivid scene pulled from her subconscious. She stretched slightly and rolled to the side, breathing in a scent that wasn't hers. Cologne, expensive, warm, male. She froze. Her eyes opened slowly, and her breath caught. She was naked, completely. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She never slept without a nightgown. She was meticulous about things like that. The cool air against her bare skin made her pull the sheets tighter around herself as she tried to make sense of what had happened. Was it just a dream? A hallucination? Before she could process anything further, a deep, unmistakable voice drifted out from the bathroom. Hey, Lynn? Her head snapped toward the sound. And there he was. Khalifa Danjuma stood in the doorway, damp from a shower, a towel slung low on his waist. His body glistened, lean and toned, a few drops of water sliding slowly down his chest. Lynn's mouth dropped open. He looked like something out of a fever dream, but this was no dream. Lynn Andrews had arrived in Paris with nothing but a suitcase full of power suits, a mind heavy with exhaustion, and a heart that needed room to breathe. The flight from Lagos had been long, but she welcomed the solitude. The seminar she came to attend was simply an excuse. What she really needed was to escape. The constant buzz of Lagos traffic, the never-ending demands of her banking job, the pressure from her parents who were already suggesting suitors again. She had spent the last few years building a life of discipline and control, working 9 to 9, saving, keeping things neat, orderly, safe. But beneath all of that structure was a restless longing she could no longer ignore. And then there was him, Khalifa Danjuma. He wasn't supposed to be here. They hadn't spoken in 8 years. Not since the heartbreak that shattered her so completely, she'd sworn off love entirely. He had been her everything once, her first love, her first heartbreak, her college fairy tale turned tragedy. Back then, she thought they'd end up together forever, until he slipped that ring off her finger just weeks before graduation and told her he wasn't ready. That memory still stung. She buried it beneath ambition, drive, and endless to-do lists. But fate had other plans. She bumped into him at the hotel bar on her first night in Paris of all places. He was attending his grandfather's birthday celebration. Still tall, still charming, still with those dangerously deep dimples that could melt the hardest resolve. And that smile unraveled her like thread. They laughed over glasses of Bordeaux, talked like old friends with secrets between their words, like no time had passed at all. One minute they were catching up, and the next they were arm in arm, walking the moonlit streets of Paris, caught in a bubble of laughter and nostalgia. Then came the chapel. They stumbled across it while wandering Montmartre, glowing under fairy lights. A small sign read, "Weddings by night love always wins." A joke at first, a passing thought. Khalifa, ever the charmer, had nudged her playfully. "Let's get married, Lynn, right here, right now." She laughed, thinking he was teasing, but his eyes, they held something different, something tender, something serious. And the woman at the reception desk? She smiled and said, "You're in luck. A couple just canceled their slot for tonight. If you want the chapel, it's yours." Lynn had looked at Khalifa, her heart pounding. He didn't blink. He reached for her hand. "Let's do something crazy for once," he whispered. "Let's write our story differently this time." And just like that, they said, "I do." No grand gown, no tuxedo, just her in a fiery Ankara wrap dress, bold and beautiful, and him in a black shirt and jeans, solemn in the candlelight. They became husband and wife in a language older than words, in laughter, in memory, in raw emotion. After the chapel, they wandered the streets hand in hand, glowing from the wine and wonder. Somewhere between a stolen kiss on the bridge and holding hands by the Eiffel Tower, he stopped and looked at her. "Your place or mine?" he asked, half teasing, half serious. Lynn laughed. "Do you know how irresistible you look when you smile like that?" He chuckled. "It's the Paris magic." She whispered, "I've never loved anyone the way I loved you." Then she kissed him, slowly, sweetly, deeply. The kind of kiss that felt like forgiveness and fire at the same time. That was the last clear memory she had. Now, Lynn stirred beneath the crisp white sheets of her hotel bed, a smile dancing on her lips. Her dreams had been electric. Champagne toasts in a candlelit jacuzzi, soft jazz playing in the background, kisses on the balcony, and making love in her queen-size bed. It had all felt so real, like a vivid scene pulled from her subconscious. She stretched slightly and rolled to the side, breathing in a scent that wasn't hers. Cologne, expensive, warm, male. She froze. Her eyes opened slowly, and her breath caught. She was naked, completely. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She never slept without a nightgown. She was meticulous about things like that. The cool air against her bare skin made her pull the sheets tighter around herself as she tried to make sense of what had happened. Was it just a dream? A hallucination? Before she could process anything further, a deep, unmistakable voice drifted out from the bathroom. "Hey, Lynn?" Her head snapped toward the sound. And there he was. Khalifa Danjuma stood in the doorway, damp from a shower, a towel slung low on his waist. His body glistened, lean and toned, a few drops of water sliding slowly down his chest. Lynn's mouth dropped open. He looked like something out of a fever dream, but this was no dream. "Khalifa?" she stammered. He leaned casually against the doorframe, his eyes scanning her face like he was watching her thoughts form. "You okay?" he asked, a knowing glint in his eye. She ducked under the covers quickly, trying to hide her bare body. "What are you doing in my room?" she asked, her voice rising in panic. He raised an eyebrow. "Your room?" he repeated. "We're married, Lynn, remember? Married?" Her eyes darted to her left hand, and there it was. A ring. Elegant, sparkling, real. Her heart stopped. I don't remember," she whispered. "We got married?" He stepped closer, sitting gently on the edge of the bed. "Last night, after the chapel, we came back here, talked for hours, made love, slept. I figured you were just tired from the wine. Made love." Her stomach flipped. She felt exposed, vulnerable, betrayed by her own body. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I always thought I'd wait," she whispered, barely audible. "For my husband." Khalifa's gaze softened. He reached for her hand, held it gently in his palm. "You did wait," he said quietly. "You are my wife, Lynn. You didn't break anything." The silence stretched. Lynn stared at him. This man she hadn't seen in 8 long years. Her first love, her last heartbreak. Now her husband. And she couldn't remember saying yes. She wiped a tear from her cheek and looked away. "I feel like a stranger in my own skin," she said softly. "How did we even get here, Khalifa?" He let out a breath, thoughtful. "Paris happened," he said simply. "And maybe it was meant to." She shook her head. "We're too different now. Too much has happened." He touched her cheek gently. "Or maybe we've both grown into who we were meant to be." Lynn didn't answer. Her heart was in chaos. Her body still remembered his touch, his lips, the way he whispered her name like a prayer. But her mind was spinning with questions, doubts, regrets. They sat in silence for a long while. Then he whispered, "Let's figure it out, together. We've already said I do. Let's see if we meant it." Lynn closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her cheek. This wasn't how she imagined her love story. But maybe, just maybe, it was how it was meant to begin. "No, you're lying." Lynn's voice trembled as she clutched the sheets tighter around herself, her eyes wide with disbelief. We can't be married, Khalifa. We're wrong for each other. We always were. Khalifa stood still, his back now against the wall of the hotel room, his gaze unreadable. That might be true, he said quietly, but the fact still remains. We're married, Lynn. Legally, emotionally, spiritually. Now the real question is, what are we going to do about it? Lynn blinked at him, her brows furrowed, heart pounding. What do you mean? What do we do about it? There was a flicker in Khalifa's eyes then, something darker, almost conflicted. We could get an annulment, he offered, his voice steady, but there was tension underneath. Pretend it never happened. For a moment, Lynn froze. An annulment? Did he really think a few strokes of a pen could erase what had just happened between them? The intimacy, the vulnerability, the connection they hadn't shared in almost a decade? She tilted her chin, eyes blazing. I think you've forgotten the most important fact, Khalifa, she said coolly. The marriage has been consummated. His mouth twitched slightly, but he said nothing. I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's a little too late for an annulment. He ran his fingers through his hair and let out a sharp exhale. All right then, a divorce. Just hearing the word divorce out loud made her chest seize. She felt as if the oxygen had been sucked from the room. Her legs wobbled slightly beneath the duvet. This couldn't be happening. She had spent the last 5 years building herself, her image, her career, her voice. She'd become a respected speaker and consultant on marriage and relationships, giving seminars from Lagos to Nairobi, lecturing couples on how to fight for love, how to fix broken homes, how to stay married. Now here she was, married by accident and already discussing a divorce? Her eyes stung as she whispered, I can't believe this is happening to me. Khalifa looked up, concern etched into his face. Lynn, she raised a shaky hand. Don't, just don't. There was a knock on the door. Both their heads snapped toward it. Khalifa grabbed his shirt from the edge of the bed, quickly throwing it over his head. That must be housekeeping, he muttered. You should dress up. As he walked to the door, Lynn called out with a forced calm, Could you come back later? I won't be checking out yet. But a voice replied, clearly and confidently. Miss Andrews, my name is Lowe. I'm a reporter. Sorry to disturb your honeymoon, but I'd like to ask you a few questions about your marriage last night. Lynn's blood turned to ice. Khalifa paused mid-step and slowly turned to face her. The horror on both their faces was palpable. So much for keeping things quiet, she murmured, her voice thick with dread. Her instincts screamed to stay silent, to pretend she wasn't there, but something inside her burned with curiosity. She stepped closer to the door, still wrapped tightly in the sheets. Mr. Lowe, she said calmly, can I ask you something? There was a brief pause. Of course, Miss Andrews. How did you know about my marriage? A chuckle. Miss Andrews, nothing happens in Paris without us knowing, especially not when it involves a renowned marriage expert suddenly tying the knot at a chapel in Montmartre. You're a public figure. We've had our eyes on you since you landed. Lynn's heart sank. She was supposed to return to Lagos under the radar. Quiet, composed, in control. Now she risked waking up on the front page of every gossip blog with only a bedsheet for dignity. I'm not ready to talk now, she said, her tone firm but polite. You can slide your card under the door. If I decide to speak, I'll reach out. I'd really appreciate 5 minutes of your time. Goodbye, Mr. Lowe. She heard the pause, the weight of disappointment, and then footsteps retreating down the hallway. Khalifa sighed, leaning his forehead against the wall. Well, there goes a quick divorce. Lynn shot him a glare. You think this is funny? He looked at her. I think it's real. Whatever we do from here, we can't afford to be careless, especially not with the press sniffing around. If we go through a scandal, it's not just your career on the line. It's mine too. Lynn fell silent. He was right. Her head swirled with the weight of consequences. Making this marriage work meant both of them had to be all in. No half-hearted gestures, No regrets whispered behind closed doors. She stared at Khalifa now, at the man who once broke her heart. He stood tall, composed, impossibly handsome. But something behind his eyes looked tired, worn, maybe even unsure. He had once been the man of her dreams, but was she the woman of his? Khalifa paced the hallway before stepping into his suite across from hers. He shut the door, dropped his keys on the desk, and slumped into the couch, rubbing his hands over his face. Married. The word echoed in his head like a scream. He hadn't come to Paris to get married. He had come for something else entirely, an engagement. But not to Lynn, to Laurel, his friend. They had been close for years, not romantic, but respectful, practical. Laurel wanted a home, security, a companion to raise children with. He needed to get married. Fast. Why? Because of the conditions of his inheritance. His grandfather, Baba Danjuma, had passed down an empire in the form of Danjuma technologies, but he had one rule. Khalifa had to be married before his 30th birthday to receive full access to his trust and take over the company as CEO. And time was running out. He wasn't in love with Laurel, but he respected her. She would have been a safe choice. And then he saw Lynn, standing by the bar in her bold Ankara wrap dress, a glass of rosé in hand, laughing with some stranger. His heart had stopped. The years fell away like dust. It was as if nothing had changed. Her laugh still curled in his ears like music. Her beauty still stunned him. Her presence still disarmed him. And when their eyes met, that was it. Everything else melted. Laurel, the plan, the deal, gone. He had always loved Lynn, but she had been the kind of woman who put her ambition first. She'd wanted to conquer the world before settling down. Just like his mother, a brilliant, powerful woman who had no time for softness, who'd left his father and built her empire brick by brick. A woman who never looked back. He had spent most of his life longing for the kind of home that felt warm, grounded, tender. But Lynn had been fire. She burned everything she touched. And yet, he couldn't resist her. Not then. Not now. Last night wasn't a mistake. It was magic. But now, that magic had a price, and he didn't know if either of them was willing to pay it. I know it seemed like a good idea at the time, Lynn said slowly, her voice tinged with regret as she pushed her fork through the untouched food on her plate. The evening breeze stirred the edges of the tablecloth, fluttering like her scattered thoughts. They were seated at a dimly lit outdoor restaurant tucked into a quiet corner of Paris, a far cry from the storm brewing between them. Khalifa sat across from her, his elbows resting on the table, a quiet storm of emotions hiding behind his deep brown eyes. "But you told me your publicist had advised you to get married," he said, gently swirling his coffee, eyes not leaving her face. "Said it would be good for your image." Lynn exhaled, sitting back in her chair. "Yes, she did," she admitted, "but I've always said I wouldn't marry just for the sake of it. I've never wanted to fake love for likes or press. I wanted the real thing, the laughter, the late-night talks, the partnership, the care." There was a long pause. Khalifa watched her closely. The woman across from him was different from the girl he knew in university. She was composed, but her vulnerability seeped through in small cracks, in the way she held her fork, in the slight tremble of her fingers, in the way her voice caught when she said care. He leaned forward slightly. "Knowing what we feel, the chemistry we have, I should have walked out the moment I saw you sitting in that lounge. It would have saved us both the confusion." Lynn's eyes flicked to his. "But you didn't." "No," he said, a faint smile curving his lips. "And here we are. No use crying over spilled milk." She set down her fork. "So what now?" He looked down at his coffee cup, then back up at her. "We can't just pretend this didn't happen. And if we split now, it'll damage everything. For both of us." "What do you mean?" "If I get divorced now, the board at Danjuma Enterprises will never take me seriously. My grandfather's will states I must be married for at least 1 full year before I can take control of the company. If I fail, Everything goes to my cousin Femi. And believe me, Femi will ruin it. Lynn blinked in shock. You never told me that. I didn't plan to get married to you, Lynn, he said softly. That wasn't part of the plan. The truth of it stung more than it should have. She nodded slowly. Then I guess we're stuck. Both of us. He gave a small, sad smile. Unless we try to make it work. Her eyes searched his face, looking for any sign of mockery or hesitation. There was none. Just sincerity. And maybe a little hope. I don't want to jump into a divorce either, she said quietly. Not just because of the press or the company, but because, he raised a brow. Because? I don't know what this is or what it could be, but maybe we owe ourselves the chance to find out. A silence passed between them, a silence filled with shared memories, past wounds, unspoken what-ifs, and the ghosts of who they once were. Khalifa nodded slowly. All right. First step, let's take it day by day. Okay? Second step, he added with a small smirk, is getting you reacquainted with my family. Lynn's eyes widened. Tonight? Yes, he said confidently, sitting back and crossing his arms. They're going to find out eventually. It's better they hear it from us in person and on our terms. And what exactly are we going to say? Hi, we got married by accident, but please pass the jollof rice? He chuckled. Just leave the explanation to me. I've always been good at winging it. Lynn rolled her eyes, but a soft smile tugged at her lips. That you have. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers. She didn't pull away. His touch sent a gentle shiver through her, familiar, warm, yet terrifying. There was something about this man, this infuriating, confusing, irresistible man, that still made her heart flutter in ways she couldn't control. And then, out of nowhere, she heard her name. Lynn Andrews, she turned sharply. A tall woman in neat, stylish joggers and a wide smile approached the table, her excitement radiating like sunlight. Oh my goodness, I can't believe it's you. Lynn blinked in surprise. Lindsay? Yes, the woman beamed. We met at the seminar earlier this week. I was the one who kept asking all the tough questions about communication and emotional intimacy. Of course, Lynn said, forcing a smile. You asked some very thoughtful questions. You were incredible. Lindsay blushed slightly. You're a lifesaver. You gave me the clarity I needed to save my relationship. I just had to come say thank you. Khalifa stood and extended his hand, his voice smooth. I'm Khalifa Danjuma, Lynn's husband. Lindsay's mouth fell open in shock. Husband? You're married? Lynn gave a sheepish smile. As of last night, Lindsay's hands flew to her chest. Oh my God, I told my sister there was something glowing about you two, and you were so calm during the seminar. I can't believe you were preparing for a wedding and didn't tell us. Well, Lynn said carefully, it was very private. Just the two of us. Honestly, I respect that, Lindsay said with a sincere nod. Love is a sacred thing. I hope you both realize how special and lucky you are. Lynn's heart caught at that word again, lucky. Lucky. Was she lucky? Was being married to Khalifa a second chance at love? Or just a beautiful trap with no exit? Would you like to join us? Khalifa asked kindly. Oh no, I couldn't, Lindsay replied, waving a hand. This is your honeymoon. I wouldn't dream of interfering. She turned to Lynn again, her eyes gleaming. Congratulations, truly. You're inspiring. I'll be cheering for you both. Thank you, Lynn said softly. As Lindsay walked away, Lynn turned back to her plate, her appetite still missing. Khalifa had sat down again, watching her. You okay? I don't know, she said honestly. Part of me wishes I was madly in love with you, that it was real, that this was the start of a fairy tale. His voice came gentle and low. And the other part? She looked into his eyes. Is terrified it's just a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. Khalifa didn't say anything, because deep down he was wondering the exact same thing. Lynn had finished dressing, her hands smoothing the sides of the elegant black linen sheath that hugged her curves and accentuated her poise. The mirror reflected a woman who looked every bit the part, calm, put together, confident. But inside, she was far from any of that. She tilted her face slightly, admiring the soft sweep of makeup that highlighted her cheekbones and defined her full lips. The effort was minimal, but the result was striking. Her hair, long and lustrous, flowed in loose curls just past her shoulders. She looked like someone who belonged in Khalifa's world, rich, composed, powerful, and yet she felt anything but. Her fingers hesitated at her side. Would he still see the same girl he once loved? The one who built walls instead of homes? Would he regret last night? Would she? Her publicist's voice echoed in her head. You need to get married, Lynn. It's the one thing missing from your brand. Softness. Stability. It will make you more relatable to your audience. Well, here it was. Marriage. But surely not like this. She was having one last glance at her reflection when a knock came at the door. Her heart jumped. She didn't need to ask who it was. It was him. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and opened the door. Khalifa stood in the hallway, stunned. For a heartbeat, he said nothing, just stared at her as if he was seeing a painting come to life. His eyes softened, and a slow smile crept across his lips. Lynn, you're incredibly beautiful. A soft blush colored her cheeks. You don't look bad yourself, she replied, voice light but shy. She wasn't lying. He was dressed in tailored charcoal trousers and a light gray shirt, rolled at the sleeves and paired with a sleek black tie. The look was clean, classic, and stylishly elegant. His presence made her feel both nervous and grounded. You look stunning, he murmured again. He stepped forward and gently reached out to tuck a loose curl behind her ear. The touch was feather-light, but it sent a ripple down her spine. She instinctively closed her eyes, soaking in the moment, suspended in the heat between them. He leaned in, lips barely an inch from hers, and then a giggle echoed from the hallway. A young couple laughing, stumbling toward their own room. Khalifa cleared his throat abruptly and took her hand. We should go, he said. She hesitated. I don't think this is a good idea. He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. We said we'd take it one step at a time. This is step one. Lynn sighed. Everything won't be fine just because you say so. But it's a good place to start, he replied, leading her gently down the hallway. They hailed a taxi and rode in relative silence through the golden streets of Paris. The further they got from the hotel, the more her anxiety returned. When they arrived at the Danjuma estate, an expansive, elegant home just outside the city, Lynn's steps slowed. She could feel the pressure mounting. This wasn't just a casual visit. It was an announcement. And despite Khalifa's calm demeanor, she knew he was just as tense. Inside, the dining room buzzed with soft conversation and the clinking of wine glasses. A long table had been set with fine china, fresh flowers, and gold flatware. The family was already gathered, his grandfather seated at the head. A regal figure in a rich agbada, flanked by Khalifa's cousin Caleb, his wife, and Laurel. Of course, Laurel was here. Khalifa had warned her in the car, but nothing could have prepared her for the knot that formed in her stomach the moment she saw the other woman. Laurel looked polished and calm in a white blouse and pearl earrings, her posture rigid, eyes locked on Lynn as soon as she entered the room. Khalifa stepped forward, gesturing for the help to bring an extra chair. Lynn smiled as best as she could, walking slowly toward the table. The elder Danjuma rose with surprising warmth. Well, well, I know that face, he said, reaching out to take her hand. But forgive me, my memory isn't what it used to be. Lynn Andrews, sir, she replied gently. You met me years ago, back when Khalifa and I were in university. I visited once, with your wife. He brightened. Ah, yes. Now I remember. You always had that sharp look in your eyes, like you were going to take over the world. Lynn chuckled. I'm trying, sir. She greeted Caleb with a polite smile. We had psychology class together, she reminded him. Lynn, that's right, he said, standing to shake her hand. It's been ages. His wife, a soft-spoken woman in teal, smiled and greeted her warmly. But then came the hardest part. She turned to Laurel. Hello, Laurel, Lynn said quietly. Laurel gave a tight nod. Lynn, it's been a while. Yeah. Then the grandfather turned to Khalifa, his tone now expectant. You summoned us, son. What's going on? Khalifa's hand tensed slightly on the back of Lynn's chair. He glanced at her once before clearing his throat and facing the table. Well, I won't drag it out, he began. The short version is, Lynn and I got married. The room fell silent. Dead silent. Even the help paused mid-step. Eyes widened. Forks froze mid-air. Laurel's lips parted slightly, her expression unreadable. The old man blinked once, then again, and then he smiled broadly. Well, it's about time one of you boys made a bold move, he laughed, reaching out to shake Khalifa's hand. Congratulations, son. But not everyone was smiling. Laurel pushed her chair back with a sharp scrape. What do you mean married? She asked coldly, standing. You were seeing someone else. You haven't seen her in years. Were you drunk or something? Khalifa looked at her directly. I'm sorry, Laurel. I never meant to hurt you, but I've been in love with Lynn since high school. That never changed. The pain in Laurel's eyes was unmistakable, even though she fought to keep her expression composed. Then you shouldn't have let me believe there was something between us, she said tightly. I know, he said softly, and I'm sorry. She turned and left the room without another word. Lynn watched her go, heart heavy. Khalifa sat down, but Lynn remained standing for a moment. She gestured toward Laurel's direction. Go, she whispered. She deserves some kind of explanation. You owe her that. He nodded and followed after her, leaving Lynn alone at the table. Everyone else returned to their food, conversations awkward and strained. But the grandfather leaned in toward her, a twinkle in his eye. You're a brave one, he said with a soft laugh. You're going to need that. Lynn smiled faintly and sat down. She picked up her fork and carefully and calmly began to eat. But inside, her heart beat like a drum. Because this was just the beginning. Khalifa found Laurel just outside the Danjuma estate, standing beneath the blooming jacaranda tree near the driveway. Her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Her face was hard, but her eyes betrayed her, glassy, burning. Laurel, wait, he said breathlessly as he caught up to her. She didn't turn. What's there to say, Khalifa? I didn't plan for this. I never meant to hurt you, he began, his voice low. She spun around, eyes blazing. You think that makes it better? You married her. You stood there and told everyone, like I meant nothing. I thought we had an understanding. That's just it, she snapped. You don't know what you're doing. You've always been torn when it comes to her. You think marrying her magically fixes everything? You could get a divorce, Khalifa. We could still continue. I know we weren't passionate, but we had respect, stability. He said nothing, just stood there uncertain, heart hammering. And don't think I didn't see it, she added bitterly, the way you looked at her tonight, like you were seeing the sun for the first time. Before he could respond, a voice floated toward them, soft and fragile. Khalifa. He turned. Lynn stood at the edge of the garden path, her face unreadable. She didn't say anything else, but the stillness between them said it all. She had heard enough. Granddad asked me to come get you. Dessert's being served, she said quietly. Laurel took a step closer, defiant. She brushed a soft kiss against the corner of Khalifa's lips. When you get back to Lagos, she said, call me. We could have dinner. Talk things through. Khalifa didn't move, but he nodded. Lynn saw it, and that nod buried something deep in her chest. Later that evening, Lynn stood in front of her suitcase, zipping it shut with slow, deliberate movements. She was supposed to fly back to Lagos tonight, but she couldn't leave, not without clarity, not without saying something. She changed into a soft ivory robe, let her hair down, and walked into the sitting room where Khalifa sat on the couch, his tie loosened, his expression distant. He barely noticed her until she sat beside him, and picked up the wooden brush from the table, pulling it gently through her long curls, silently, deliberately. Only then did he look at her. "You think it's a good idea?" she said, brushing her hair with practiced calm. "Having dinner with someone you used to see?" His jaw tightened slightly. "I'm a grown man, Lynn. I can handle it." She turned to face him, anger creeping into her tone. "That's not the point. I'm not questioning whether you can handle it. I'm asking why you would want to." "I just want to talk to her," he said flatly. "Why?" she asked again, voice cracking this time. "You stood there. You let her kiss you. You didn't say a word. You didn't pull away. And you nodded when she asked to see you again." His brows furrowed. "You don't understand." "You're right," she cut in, standing now, voice trembling. "I don't, because I don't know you. We got married on a whim. We're stuck in a situation we can't untangle. And now I'm watching you entertain the idea of reconnecting with someone you were supposed to move on from." He rose too, his voice rising just enough. "You think this is easy for me? You think I had this planned out?" "No," she snapped, "but I thought the least you'd do was show me some respect." His silence was deafening. Lynn's shoulders fell. "I can't do this if I'm just going to be a placeholder while you figure out your feelings." "You're not a placeholder," he said quickly. "Don't ever say that." "Then show me Khalifa." They stood, eyes locked, neither willing to step back. "I don't know everything about you," he said, his voice softening, "but I know what we have isn't fake." Her expression flickered. "We have chemistry, Lynn," he added, stepping closer. "We always have." She hesitated, breath caught in her throat. And then he moved. He cupped her face, leaned in, and kissed her. Soft, slow, searching. She responded. Because despite the confusion, despite the hurt, he still made her feel something no one else ever had. He deepened the kiss, hands sliding around her waist as he pulled her gently to him. The brush dropped to the floor, forgotten, as he lifted her in his arms and carried her back into the bedroom. There was no more talking. Just fingers trailing along silk. Just sighs and moans and soft gasps of breath. He kissed her neck, her shoulders, every inch of skin like it was familiar territory rediscovered, and she clung to him, not out of desperation, but out of surrender. Out of the need to be seen, touched, and chosen. When they finally lay tangled in each other's arms beneath the sheets, sweat slicked and breathless, Lynn stared at the ceiling, blinking back tears. Because in that moment she realized they had chemistry. But did they have anything else? Lynn stepped off the plane into the Lagos heat, her heels clicking against the polished airport floor with mechanical precision. But inside she felt like a woman unraveling. The moment her feet touched Nigerian soil, a wave of regret hit her harder than she'd expected. What had she done? The soul of it felt surreal now. The chapel in Paris, the rushed vows, the hotel kisses, the mind-bending intimacy, the emotions she couldn't quite name, the man she didn't fully know anymore. And the hurt, oh the hurt, watching Khalifa nod at Laurel's dinner invitation, as if nothing had happened between them. As if they hadn't just shared a night that changed everything. A night that clearly meant more to her than it did to him. She closed her eyes in the back seat of the Uber, head resting on the window, willing herself to forget the softness in his eyes when he kissed her. The way he whispered her name. The way her body still felt marked by him. Back in her flat, everything was too still. The silence wasn't comforting, it was condemning. And then, just before bed, she felt off, her chest tight, her stomach twisting. In the moment she brushed her hand over her skin, her instincts screamed. She stared at the pregnancy test in the bathroom like it was a ticking bomb. 2 pink lines. Positive. She dropped onto the cold tile floor, back against the wall, heartbeat racing. She was pregnant. Pregnant. With Khalifa Danjuma's child. Her mind reeled. He was her first, her only, the man she thought she would never lie next to again. And now her body had sealed a bond her heart wasn't even sure it wanted. She wanted to cry. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to throw something, maybe at fate itself. But mostly she wanted to disappear. Because how do you tell a man, your ex, your unexpected husband, your accidental lover, that you're pregnant and you're not even sure he wants you? By morning, she sat by her window in a silk robe, sipping lukewarm tea that had long gone cold. The test lay on the coffee table, covered in a napkin like a buried secret. She kept glancing at it like it might vanish, like maybe if she looked away long enough, this whole thing would resolve itself. How was she going to tell him? How would he react? Would he demand a divorce faster? Would he offer money and walk away? Would he ask for joint custody, like some corporate agreement? Would he even believe her? Before she could spiral further, there was a knock at her door. One loud, insistent knock. Her brows furrowed. She wasn't expecting anyone. She tied her robe tighter, heart pounding. The knock came again. She opened the door. And there he was, Khalifa, looking sharp and tired and handsome and nervous all at once. She blinked. What? What are you doing here? I needed to see you, he said, his voice low, urgent. She stepped aside, unsure of what else to do. He walked in like he'd been there before, and he had, once, a lifetime ago, before they shattered. I've been thinking about us, he said, his hands twitching slightly as he spoke. About last night. About everything. And wait, she interrupted, moving toward him. Khalifa, But he was already moving. Just a sec, he said, walking toward the hallway. Where's your restroom? No, wait, she called out, but it was too late. He was already inside. Lynn stood frozen in the middle of her living room, stomach in her throat. Seconds passed, then silence, then a voice, low, shocked. Lynn. She closed her eyes. Of all the ways to tell him, he walked out slowly, holding the white stick in his hand, his fingers curled tightly around it as if it were some sacred relic. He looked at her. His voice was barely above a whisper. Is this real? She swallowed. Her throat burned. Yes, she said. It's real. He stared at the test again, reading the two pink lines like a man translating a foreign language. You're pregnant. She nodded. With my child. Another nod. Yes, you're my first Khalifa. You're my only. The room fell silent. He sat on the arm of the couch, the test still in his hand, his expression unreadable, part confusion, part awe, part fear. She stood there, arms crossed around herself like armor. I was going to tell you, she said quietly. I just needed time to figure out how. He didn't respond immediately. And that silence hurt more than words. Finally, he looked up at her. It's all happening so fast, he said, his voice raw. Marriage, now a baby, and we're still trying to figure us out. I know, she said. I didn't plan any of this. I didn't either. Another pause. Then he stood, closing the distance between them. He reached out slowly, brushing her hair behind her ear, the same way he had in Paris. I don't know what this means yet, Lynn, he said softly, but I know I'm not walking away. A tear slipped down her cheek. She hadn't even realized she was crying. You don't have to decide anything now, she whispered. I just needed you to know. He nodded. Thank you for telling me. He reached for her hand and she let him. And in that moment, raw, uncertain, unspoken, something passed between them. Something fragile but alive. Maybe not love, but something worth fighting for. It had been 2 days since Khalifa found out. Since he stood in Lynn's living room with a pregnancy test in hand, eyes wide, voice cracking with shock. Since he reached out and held her like she was the only thing anchoring him to the earth. Now he was back, again. Lynn hadn't expected him that morning, but when she heard the knock and opened the door, There he was, a small travel bag slung over his shoulder, a gentle, tired smile on his lips. She stared at him. "You're back?" "I never really left," he said. Her breath caught. "I packed a few things," he added, stepping in. "If you'll let me stay, not just because of the baby, but because I want to." Lynn blinked fast. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," he said. "We didn't just reconnect, Lynn. Us, it's not an accident. It's not a mistake. It's divine timing." She stood still, stunned. He continued, voice softer now. "Do you know how many times I've thought about you? Wondered how you were, where you were, what your life looked like without me in it. And then Paris happened. And just like that, I knew." "Knew what?" she whispered. "That this," he gestured between them, "was always meant to happen. We just needed time to grow into it." She covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed. The tears came before she could stop them. Khalifa closed the distance between them and wrapped her in his arms. "I'm here. For real this time. You, me, and this baby, we're doing this." And for the first time since Paris, she let herself believe it might be true. But not everyone was ready to see them happy. By midweek, the whispers had started. It began with a blurry photo online, Khalifa outside Lynn's apartment, carrying a bag. Then came the headline, "Marriage Expert or Scandal Queen? Lynn Andrews' Secret Pregnancy Exposed." Her phone buzzed nonstop. Calls, emails, texts from clients, brands, PR managers. "What's going on, Lynn? Is this real? Why didn't you tell us?" She stood in her bathroom one morning, holding the phone with shaking hands. The pregnancy test was still in the drawer, still hidden. But now the world was sniffing around like wolves. The worst of it came with a sharp knock at her door and a voice she hadn't heard in person since Paris. "Laurel?" Lynn opened the door, stunned. The other woman stood poised and calm, dressed in a crisp white blouse and beige slacks. But her eyes were a storm. "I figured I'd hear it from you eventually," Laurel said. "But I guess I had to read it in the news like everyone else." Lynn's voice wavered. "You should talk to Khalifa." "Oh, I will," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But I thought it might be nice to hear it from the woman who stole him." "I didn't steal anyone," Lynn said, her voice strengthening. "You knew he never loved you the way he loved me." Laurel's mask cracked for a second, then she smirked. "You're pregnant, and he's playing house now. But let me remind you, he only married you because it was convenient, temporary, strategic. Don't let this dream fool you." And with that, she turned and walked away. Lynn closed the door gently. Her chest ached. But when Khalifa came home that night and saw her sitting on the couch with swollen eyes, he dropped his bag and rushed to her side. "She came," Lynn said simply. "I figured she would," he said. "She thinks this is all a game, a tactic." Khalifa knelt before her, took her hands in his. "Then let me be clear." He met her eyes with a certainty that made her breath hitch. "You are not a placeholder. You are not second best. And I would choose you over her, over anyone, over and over again. Even if there were no baby, even if this marriage wasn't tied to my legacy, even if the whole world fell apart tomorrow." Lynn opened her mouth, but no words came, just the slow tear running down her cheek. He kissed her hands, then her stomach. "This child," he whispered, "is the proof that our story didn't end back then. It just waited. This is God's plan." She cradled his face, resting her forehead against his. "Then let's stop hiding. No more fear." "No more," he promised. The next day she posted a statement. Just a single photo, her hand in Khalifa's, resting over her slightly curved stomach. No caption, no filter, no press release. Just truth. The internet broke. But she didn't care, because for once she felt free. Khalifa moved in the next day, not with fanfare or fancy declarations, but with the quiet certainty of a man who had made his mind. A small duffel bag, a garment bag with pressed suits, a box of books, and a fresh carton of vitamins he had picked up for her without being asked. Lynn watched from the couch as he entered her apartment, wearing a plain white t-shirt, gray joggers, and an expression that read, "This is home now." "Is this okay?" he asked, looking at her with a mixture of hope and caution. She stood up and walked over to him, placing her hand on his chest. "You're here," she whispered. "That's enough for me." The rest of the day moved slowly, sweetly, as if time had paused to let them breathe. Khalifa insisted she rest while he set up his side of the wardrobe. He even tried to cook dinner, burn the rice, undercook the chicken, but the laughter that filled the kitchen made up for the disaster. It was awkward, new, imperfect, but it was theirs. Later that evening, as Lynn curled up beside him on the couch, his palm resting protectively on her belly, she realized something startling. She wasn't scared anymore. The world, however, hadn't gone silent. Her team had been in a frenzy since the post. But something unexpected happened. Instead of the backlash her publicist had feared, the world embraced her. Writers praised her for normalizing messy, beautiful beginnings. Women from all over Africa sent in letters, emails, DMs, celebrating her strength, her honesty, her choice. "Marriage experts get married too," one headline read. "Lynn Andrews, breaking traditions, building new ones." Another glowed. Her most viral video had just crossed 1 million views overnight. Sponsorships flooded in. Instead of destroying her brand, this child, this surprise, had breathed new life into it. But not everyone celebrated. Laurel resurfaced online in a subtle but deliberate way. A polished Instagram photo of her in an all-white power suit, sipping champagne with a caption that read, "Some people settle, others choose legacy." The comments section exploded. Lynn didn't react, but Khalifa did. He was pouring cereal the morning the post went viral. He dropped the spoon, stormed to his phone, typed something, then stopped. Lynn watched him quietly from the doorway. "You don't have to defend me." "I'm not defending you," he said, locking his phone. "I'm reminding her that I've already chosen." And he did, over and over, in ways that weren't loud but deeply felt. He went with her to her first scan, held her hand as they watched the small flutter of a heartbeat on the screen. He kissed her temple when she cried in the middle of the night, over stretch marks that hadn't even appeared yet, over fears of being a bad mother, over the years she thought she had wasted on the wrong men. He rubbed her feet without asking. Cooked again, better this time. And every time someone asked him about Laurel, especially the press, his answer was the same. "I'm married to Lynn. That's all I care about." 3 weeks later, Khalifa surprised her with something that nearly made her cry all over again. She came home from a late seminar to find the nursery freshly painted, soft yellows and greens, simple and peaceful. In the middle sat a vintage rocking chair with a note on the cushion. "For you, for late nights, for lullabies." She sat in it, ran her hand over the armrest, and realized how far she'd come. This child, this tiny being growing inside her, had already rewritten everything she thought she knew about love. They stood on the balcony one warm Sunday morning, watching the sky change colors. Lynn leaned into Khalifa's chest, his arms around her like a promise. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Anything. I used to be terrified of the idea of having a baby." He kissed her hair. "And now? I feel like I found my beginning." He turned her gently so they were face to face. "You didn't just find your beginning, Lynn," he said softly. "You are mine." She didn't answer. She just kissed him. Because in that moment, she knew whatever happened next, they would face it together. The morning air inside the Danjuma family estate buzzed with quiet expectancy. Khalifa stood in the garden, arms folded, staring out at the koi pond his grandfather loved so much. The old man had asked to see him, alone. No assistants, no board members, no distractions. He hadn't slept much. Though months had passed since the Paris whirlwind, the storm hadn't completely settled. His marriage had blossomed into something steady and beautiful, yes, but the terms of his inheritance still hung over him like a ticking clock. 1 year, that was the rule. Be married, faithfully, publicly, completely, for 1 year, or forfeit his position as CEO of Denjuma Enterprises. And now, with just under 4 months left, Khalifa was running out of time. Not because he feared the deadline, but because, for the first time, he didn't care about the title anymore. He had already found what truly mattered. Come, sit with me. His grandfather's voice was softer now. Age had slowed his steps, but sharpened his wisdom. He was seated beneath the large almond tree, a blanket across his lap, eyes clear and wise. Khalifa sat beside him, quiet. "I've been watching you, boy," the old man said, not looking at him. Khalifa said nothing. "At first I thought your marriage was just another strategic move, another way to protect what you think you've earned. But I've seen the way you look at her, your wife, the way you speak about her, the way you shield her, care for her. And I've seen how she looks at you too, like she trusts you, like she knows she's safe." Still, Khalifa remained silent, listening. His grandfather reached beside him and pulled out a file. Thick, stamped, official. "I'm signing over Denjuma Enterprises to you today." Khalifa turned sharply. "What? You've become the man I prayed you would be. Not just a businessman, but a man of honor, a man who fights for his family. You didn't wait for the company to make you that. You became that on your own." Khalifa blinked. "But the clause. I made that clause to teach you that love is more valuable than power, and you learned that lesson better than I expected. I see no reason to delay what's already yours." The old man handed him the folder. "I'm proud of you, Khalifa." Khalifa's throat closed with emotion. He took the file with trembling hands, realizing that in choosing Lynn, choosing love, he had finally become more than his ambition. He had become a man. That same afternoon, Lynn clutched her belly in pain. It started as a dull ache. She'd brushed it off, told herself it was just stress, just a long day, or maybe something she ate. But when she doubled over while folding laundry and nearly passed out, she knew something was very wrong. Khalifa had just returned home when he heard the crash. "Lynn," he called out, dropping the keys and sprinting down the hallway. She was on the floor, pale, one hand gripping the arm of the couch, the other pressed against her stomach. His heart stopped. "Baby, what's wrong?" I don't know," she whispered, her voice strained. Without hesitation, he scooped her into his arms, grabbed his phone, and was in the car within 2 minutes. No driver, no questions. Just him and her. The hospital was a blur of lights, voices, and machines. Khalifa never left her side. When they wheeled her into emergency observation, he walked alongside her, his hand firmly wrapped around hers. When the doctor came in with a worried frown, he stood like stone beside her bed, holding his breath as if doing so could keep her from slipping. Her blood pressure spiked suddenly, the doctor explained. "We're concerned about preeclampsia. We're monitoring closely. The baby's heartbeat is stable, but we'll need to keep her here for a while." Khalifa nodded. "Do whatever it takes." He didn't sleep that night. He stayed on the stiff hospital chair, one hand on her belly, whispering words to their unborn child, as Lynn drifted in and out of light medication-induced sleep. "Hey," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You scared me today." She stirred faintly. "I'm sorry." "No," he said softly. "Don't ever apologize. You're carrying my whole heart in that belly." She smiled weakly. "I'm never letting anything happen to you, to either of you." Lynn remained in the hospital for 3 more days, and Khalifa never left. He ordered food for the nurses, brought her books and fuzzy socks, talked to her belly in goofy voices, slept only when she made him. "You're always here," she whispered one evening, her eyes glassy with emotion. "Where else would I be?" he replied, brushing her hair from her forehead. I didn't expect you to care like this." "I didn't either," he admitted. "But you and this baby, You've changed me." She paused, watching him. "And I'm grateful," she said quietly. He leaned forward and kissed her hand. "Don't thank me," he murmured. "Loving you is the only thing I've ever been truly sure about." By the end of the week, Lynn was discharged with instructions to rest more and avoid stress. Khalifa became her unofficial nurse, bodyguard, and cheerleader. He canceled meetings, turned down events, moved all operations virtually so he could stay by her side. One afternoon, as she lay curled on the couch, he came in with warm hibiscus tea and her favorite puff-puff. "Any other cravings, boss lady?" he teased. She laughed, placing a hand on her bump. "We'll let you know." As she sipped her tea, she watched him move around the apartment, folding laundry, adjusting her pillows, checking her vitals like a man on a mission. "I used to think I'd do life alone," she said suddenly. He looked up. "Not because I didn't want love, but because I didn't think I could trust someone to stay." He crossed the room, knelt in front of her, and took her hand. "I'm staying," he said firmly. "Forever, Lynn. Through contracts, babies, chaos, careers. I'm not going anywhere." She nodded slowly, her throat tight. The baby kicked, and they both laughed, because even the baby agreed. Lynn stood barefoot in the nursery, her hand gently cradling the swell of her belly. The morning sun spilled through the windows, painting soft gold across the walls. The room smelled like fresh lavender and baby powder, and the soft hum of birds outside brought a strange calm over her. She turned slowly, eyes roaming over the carefully placed baby clothes. The crib, the wall stickers of stars and clouds. Every piece was picked by Khalifa. Every inch was touched by love. She heard footsteps behind her. "Khalifa, I was hoping you'd be in here." She turned around and gasped softly. He was in a simple navy blue caftan, holding something small in his hand, a ring box. Her heart skipped. He walked toward her slowly, each step deliberate. "I know we already said I do," he said, eyes never leaving hers. "But we said it in the middle of confusion, wild feelings, in a crazy city." She smiled through the sting in her eyes. "But today," he continued, "I want to ask you again, not because of the company, not because of the baby, but because I love you, fiercely, faithfully, fully." He dropped to one knee. "Lynn Ifeoma Andrews Danjuma, will you marry me again? This time not out of a dare, but out of choice?" She burst into tears. "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." He slipped the new ring on her finger, a sleek gold band with a delicate diamond halo. This one wasn't flashy, it was timeless. Like them, the surprise didn't stop there. 2 weeks later, Lynn stepped into a rooftop garden decorated in baby blue, ivory, and gold. She was stunned. All her favorite people were there. The air buzzed with love and music. Food flowed, friends laughed. Her parents hugged her so tight she nearly cried again. And Khalifa? He moved through the crowd like a proud king, checking in on everyone, making sure Lynn never lifted a finger. "This," she whispered to him as they slow danced near the cake table, "is what dreams look like." "No," he said, kissing her forehead. "This is what God's plan looks like." The baby came a week later. A boy. Khalifa cried harder than she did. They named him Malachi, meaning my angel, my messenger, because he was the child who brought them back together. 3 months later, Lynn sat on a velvet couch under bright lights, camera crews swirling around her. She was doing her first televised interview since the wedding. The baby, in the whirlwind media coverage. The host leaned forward. "Lynn, you've taught so many about the institution of marriage, but yours started so untraditionally. What would you say to women out there who feel love may never find them?" Lynn smiled, a calm, full smile that reached her eyes. "I spent years telling people how to love, how to make marriage work, but deep down I didn't think I was worthy of it. I thought I had missed my chance, or that love wasn't designed for people like me, career-driven, guarded, complex. She paused. But love found me in the most unexpected way. What started as one foolish, impulsive decision turned out to be the best blessing of my life. The host leaned in. And Khalifa? Is he the man you imagine? Lynn laughed softly. No, he's better. He never wavered. Through the pregnancy, the headlines, the pressure, he showed up, again and again. He wasn't just the perfect husband. He became the right MD. He tripled the company's income in less than a year. His grandfather says he's the best decision Danjuma Enterprises ever made. There was a round of applause from the audience. Lynn smiled wider. Our love didn't start perfect, she said, but it was real, and I wouldn't change a single moment. Back home, Khalifa watched the interview while holding baby Malachi on his chest. The little boy cooed softly as his mother's face lit up the screen. Khalifa smiled, brushing a kiss on his son's head. Your mom's a queen, he whispered. Malachi yawned, and Khalifa closed his eyes, holding his entire world in his arms. 1 year later, the halls of Danjuma Enterprises echoed with quiet reverence as the boardroom doors opened. Cameras flashed, journalists leaned forward with pens poised. The man of the hour stepped up to the podium, his presence commanding, his voice calm. Khalifa Danjuma, Chief Executive Officer, husband, father, visionary. And in just 12 months, he had transformed Danjuma Enterprises into one of the fastest-growing conglomerates in West Africa, tripling the company's revenue, expanding its reach into tech, renewable energy, and international trade. Investors praised him, partners respected him, and employees adored him. But the only approval he truly craved came from the man seated proudly in the front row, his grandfather. You've done well, boy, the old man whispered as the room erupted into applause. You didn't just inherit the empire, you earned it. Khalifa smiled, heart full. Meanwhile, across town, Lynn Andrews Danjuma stood in a sleek, marbled studio preparing for her TED Talk. She adjusted the mic clip to her rose gold blazer, took a deep breath, and glanced down at her handwritten note card. But she wouldn't need it. This story, her story, was etched into every fiber of her being. Her career had soared in the past year, not because she pretended to be perfect, but because she was real. She talked about mistakes, about pain, about doing things scared, about finding love after thinking she'd never be worthy of it. She was no longer just a marriage expert. She was living proof. Back home, baby Malachi, now toddling on wobbly legs, laughed as he chased bubbles in the garden. The sun cast a golden hue over the Danjuma estate, and laughter echoed through the air like music. Khalifa joined them shortly after, scooping his son into his arms and pressing a kiss to Lynn's forehead. She leaned into him with a soft sigh. They had once been strangers in the same love story, but now they were everything to each other. Theirs was the kind of story that didn't follow the rules. Spontaneous, wild, a little foolish. But it bloomed anyway. Not despite the chaos, but because of it. A moment that started as a mistake had blossomed into legacy. And they wouldn't change a single thing. The end. Dear viewers, what lesson did you take away from this dramatic tale? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.